to me.
Yeah, so I'm Becky Bannister. I am Duan Corlett's fiance. We've recently got engaged, but Duan has been living with me for about 10 years now, although he had a severe relapse back in 2018.
What changed in our relationship and what changed about me in the second half of 2018?
So Duan and I got together in about May 2018, and the first few months were quite a busy period. Duan had just been promoted at work and had become chairman of the hockey club that we met through, and we would go out quite often together. And towards probably about July time, Duan actually went on a week's holiday to Norway, which was a adventure holiday, including treks and glaciers and all sorts. And actually, it was when he came back from that, we first started to notice that Duan would say on the odd occasion he felt quite tired. I remember one particular time we had been out and we had come back for tea, but Duan really couldn't really process what he wanted to eat that night, so we kept it quite simple. And then there was a couple of occasions leading up to about August 2018 where Duan had to come home from work early because he was not coping so well in work.
How did the relationship change as Duan's health deteriorated significantly?
Tough. I would get home from work, and I remember one particular occasion that I opened the door to the lounge, which I knew Duan was in, and I was just about to get ready to go out to play netball. I opened the door and Duan was just lying on a blow-up bed in the middle of the lounge because that was where he was resting, and he literally just looked at me and turned over, and that was he couldn't communicate with me, and it was, he was just acknowledging that I had arrived home and turned over just because he couldn't cope to speak to me. Well, it was difficult. I was often occasion may have gone to the next room and shed a tear because it was just so heartbreaking to see someone that you loved in such a position that they couldn't even communicate with you. And at this point, Duan had initially started to try to seek professional help, so there was hope on the horizon. But when you see these dark times and the time that he just couldn't speak to you, it's there's no other emotion than just sheer sadness. To be honest, a lot of people didn't understand, and I would try to explain to colleagues or friends I had just recently met in York that Duan couldn't meet them because he wasn't in a position to. And I know that within the first year, particularly of us getting together, and the fact that Duan's relapse happened within 4 months of us getting together, that it did have a big impact on what people thought of our relationship and what should be happening. Questioning, like, is Duan going to get better? What's the long term of this? We want the best for you going in the future. Is there a future between you and Duan if Duan's health is this bad? So I think it was not a pressure, but more that you would start thinking these things. I think Duan and I also thought these things, and at the worst of times, I know Duan's told me that he thought that he would just have to let me go, and so I could move on with my life if his health didn't improve.
How do you think we got through it?
I think we both recognised that in the first few months of our relationship that there was a particular commitment and spark between one another, and we did found a really strong connection for one another then. Well, I think Duan's mental strength towards his improvement of his health was particularly beneficial for my approach and understanding. Duan continued to be steadfast throughout, to know that there is a way to improve and a way to get to a position that he was able to cope with more things and improve his energy levels. And as he started to get professional help and advice, he was able to really put that in motion. And I think his like his enthusiasm or his strength to make sure he does improve, and was helpful for the rest of us, and particularly me and his family, that we could see the light at the end of the tunnel. I could learn actually what kind of energy levels he had in the day, and maybe rather than going and just unleash what I had been up to that day, it might have been a couple of questions so I could gauge actually, was he going to be in a position to speak to me about his day or my day. And I think often I would wait for Dewin to speak as well, because I knew that then he would have enough energy levels to discuss things with me.
Did you find it hard to relax when you were at home?
I think at points I certainly felt like I was walking on a bit of eggshells at places, and I'm one for wanting to whip the hoover around and make things tidy, but I also had to be conscious that actually me moving around the flat was even intolerance to Dewin. Me just walking up and down the stairs and him hearing me upstairs was sometimes too much for Dewin, so I had to be really conscious of when I was doing things. So there was certainly a lot of adjustments in those first few months of us moving in together. Dewin was able to be relatively self-sufficient in the day, because I would make sure that there was food in to make sure he had sufficient food for his lunches that he would have. And but on the weekends it would take quite a lot of planning to make sure that we had all the food in required for the week, and everything was done around the house, that there was the laundry was done, and make sure that there was fresh bedding and towels, for example. I think up to that point, before I moved home, I think Dewin was really struggling with these things, and he even had to get his mum and dad round just to take the bin round the block, so that he could take the rubbish out. So I think he found it useful to have someone around the house to help. But bearing in mind I had to do all these things whilst someone was there living with me, so I still had to be conscious of when I would get the hoover out and make sure that Dewin potentially had earplugs and headphones on at that point so he could cope with the sound. And then also in terms of Dewin's light tolerance as well, as what I've spoken about his noise tolerance, but he also couldn't, in those first few months of me moving in and prior to that, he couldn't really have the blinds open or a natural light in very much, which it was just being aware of. I couldn't just fling open the curtains and open the windows, because also Dewin had to have the temperature regulated in the flat. So I think it's just being mindful of these things, so that someone living with ME is able to cope within a comfortable environment, and their energy levels aren't being taken up too much about things that actually I could cope with the curtains closed, and my main priority was Dewin's health. So I had to make sure that those accommodations were made. At that stage, we weren't able to do anything as a couple. I would just arrange things with friends and family, and it was hard to then leave Dewin in the flat while I was going out and meeting people and seeing my nephews and friends and family. But I think Dewin was happy that I was still able to lead a life, even though he wasn't able to at that time, and was still an improvement in his health. And I think that balance made sure I was able to cope with the situation as well. It was really such a lovely experience to start being able to go out together and meet friends and family and start enjoying each other's company. I think when you're in other people's company, often you find out things about the other person that you had done previously, and you're in a group chat, and it certainly made it easier to cope with the situation. And also we started seeing those sparks that had been undercover really due to Dewin's energies levels for so long. So the past 4 years, particularly the first couple of years, have been really tough. But we've got through it together, and we've got to this stage that we can look forward to the future. And those dark times have been worth it. We've learnt a lot about each other, and we look forward to seeing what the future holds.